We come to this time and this place to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair with all her people one. As is our custom, if you would like to come and light a candle for whatever personal or private reason, please do so while we sit in stillness listening to the prelude. Please stand in body or spirit for our chalice lighting and spoken affirmation. We light this chalice, symbol of our purpose to bring more love and justice into the world. We light this chalice knowing our congregation as a church dispersed across communities, not bound by walls, but connected through the web of life. Join me as together we remind ourselves of the affirmation that is a cornerstone of our free faith tradition. The words, should you need them, are in the morning program. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. Please be seated. A Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Naomi King, writes, "When we introduce ourselves to another person, we usually extend our hand and summarize ourselves with one word, usually our name. Hello, my name is Naomi. These are the kinds of face-to-face greetings that initiate relationships, that open our hearts and act as a bridge of connection from one person to the next. But there's another kind of one-word naming that goes on in our larger society that burns bridges, locks down relationships, and keeps us from living our promises to each other. We know these words. These are not words I need to repeat here, for repeating them simply gives them more power. But they're the more horrible terms equivalent to shark and monster and demon. These are words denying inherent dignity. These are the words that undermine and attack inherent worth, for those words have one powerful, hurtful message. You are not worthy, you are not human, you are not enough. Throughout my life, I've had plenty of those words, those labels ascribed to me. So many that, although I may stretch out my hand and say, "Hello, my name is Naomi," what I feel I'm saying at times is, "Hello, I'm worthless," or "Hello, I'm bad and wrong." I came into our religious community because we promised to counter those messages. I am part of a religious community because we promise not to reduce each other to terrible labels, not to strip each other of our humanity, not to ascribe levels of worthiness to one another. Most of us need to celebrate life, to feel our inherent worth, to be restored our dignity, to practice justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships. Most of us yearn to say, "Hello, I am somebody," and to be greeted, "Hello, somebody, welcome, we're glad you're here." Most of us hunger for affirmation and celebration in who we are, and in the gifts and blessings we bring this world. Most of us come here to be greeted as the loving, generous, compassionate people we are. Each of us has at least one blessing. I believe each of us offers many blessings to this world and who we are. But sometimes we and our world, even our beloved community, might have a difficult time affirming and seeing those blessings. We are all blessings to this world. Our work of building bridges of connection, by finding and naming and affirming those blessings we are, is the work of nurturing our spirits and healing our world. Amen. Susan Rako, MD, is the author of several books, including That's How the Light Gets In, Memoir of a Psychiatrist, and is co-editor of SEMRAD, The Heart of a Therapist. She wrote these words for the February 23, 2018 issue of Psychology Today. During early childhood development, one consequence of the attainment of speech is the relief that comes for a very young child when they are able to name something. Giving something a name makes it real, as well as something that can be communicated about. This is a constructive achievement. There is another, but painfully and unfortunately destructive development that can come as a consequence of naming things. That is, naming by coining a phrase for the purpose of legitimizing something that, with any thought, would be subject to repudiation. The phrase may seem clever and effectively distracts from the actual meaning, such as drive-by shooting or ethnic cleansing. Cleansing makes it sound like a good thing, doesn't it? And more recently, chain immigration. Chain sounds ominous, while the phrase actually refers to an attempt to reunite members of a family. Recently, the phrase Washington Street Corridor has been coined either by the developer or the media to name a project costing mega millions of dollars to redesign and develop a significant part of a Boston suburb. Those of us who live in Newtonville live in a village of Newton, incorporated as a separate town known as Cambridge Village in 1688, then renamed Newtown in 1691, and finally Newton in 1776, becoming a city in 1873, which is about the time my house was built. We do not live on a corridor. The power of naming exists in its wholesome form, but everything has a shadow, even the power of naming.
Has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from creed to king. Love will guide us through the hot night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hot night.
For a few moments, let us seek quiet. Not the quiet that is the absence of noise, for there is always noise. Rather, it is like the stillness of a friend listening, the noontime silence of sunlight on a lake, the silence of a new idea, a thought that makes the world pause, the quiet of growing plants, the quiet of a child sleeping, the silence that brings rest, the silence that brings renewal, the silence from which hope and love emerge. Let us pause for a few moments to listen for the stillness that rests beneath the confusion and complexities of our lives. Carol Hay is an associate professor of philosophy at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell. She wrote the following words, excerpted from a 2019 op-ed piece in the New York Times. Who counts as a woman? Is there some set of core experiences distinctive of womanhood, some shared set of adventures and exploits that every woman will encounter on her journey from diapers to the grave? The recent debates over the experiences of trans women gives us new reason to return to a question feminists have been grappling with for decades. Ever since Simone de Beauvoir quipped in 1949 that one is not born a woman but becomes one, feminists have been discussing the implications of understanding gender as a cultural construct. But more recently, this approach to gender has come under scrutiny. After all, it's all well and good to say that gender is a cultural construct, but it's a mistake to then pretend that cultures construct gender the same way for all people. Let's just say that the sisterhood hasn't always been great about attending equally to the experiences of all sisters. But thanks to the past 40 years of work from intersectionalist feminists, we're finally paying attention to what women of color have been saying since at least the days when Sojourner Truth had to ask if she, too, got to count as a woman. That what it's like to be a woman varies drastically across social lines of race, socioeconomic class, disability, and so on. And that if we try to pretend otherwise, we usually just end up pretending that the experiences of the wealthy, white, straight, able-bodied women who already have more than their fair share of social privilege are the experiences of all women. Any attempt to catalog the commonalities among women, in other words, has the inescapable result that there is some correct way to be a woman. This will inevitably encourage and legitimize certain experiences of gender and discourage and delegitimize others, subtly reinforcing and entrenching precisely those forces of socialization of which feminists claim to be critical. And what's worse, it will inevitably leave some people out. It will mean that there are real women whom feminism should be concerned about, and that there are imposters who do not qualify for feminist political representation. If 30-plus years of intersectional feminism has taught us anything, it's that this is precisely the move that feminists need to stop making. There you are. Please welcome our wonderful speaker today.
Well, let me first say that it is an honor to be invited here today. I have the utmost respect for your mission and your values, so thank you very much. Since the last time I was here, I'm going to give you a short update. This last semester is the first semester since my reinstatement, and I can say objectively that it was a success. For instance, 100%. I have a 100% retention rate in my students. That means not one student withdrew. Okay. As I was saying, over 100% of my students I have 100% retention rate with my students. 95% of the students successfully passed the class. I was able to research and share my research at the College English Association's National Conference in Birmingham, Alabama. It wasn't easy returning to Southeastern. There were some painful memories, of course, and also for instance, I just need to address something. I'm really not. I have spent a lifetime being mocked for my appearance, and so having my appearance broadcast is something that I'm not really comfortable with, and that's one of the reasons I'm wearing the mask today. So it's very. I've had a lot of bullying, violence, death threats. A lot of very bad things have happened to me in my life, And so I do find a little bit of security since the pandemic and wearing and having the comfort of a mask. So again, that really threw me. I apologize. Okay. Anyway, I've lost some time here, so I'm going to try to. I'm going to just move ahead with my actual presentation. And so my question is, why did it happen? Okay. Okay. Why did it happen? The discrimination, the loss of my job, my reputation, 10 years gone. You know, I said 10 years gone. I lived those years, but it's not really living when you're caught between grieving the loss of the life you had and fighting for a future that you don't know you'll have, all because of a label other people applied to you. In my case, transgender. The history of the term transgender, it emerged from two terms that have been around for several decades, transvestite and transsexual. It is, in fact, we call it a neologism, a new word. Alfred Kroeber, for instance, used the first recorded use of the word was from of the word transvestite as a person who wears the clothes of the opposite sex, and that was in Alfred Kroeber's Handbook of Indians of California. The Tangojum and Tanasum were the transvestite sexual perverts recognized by all North American tribes. That is a direct quote from his book. Now, Alfred Kroeber, I don't think that he was a bad man, but he reflected the thinking and attitude of his time. He was also the father of Ursula Le Guin, who is a progressive science fiction author, right? And even this quote, it says something very important about the indigenous culture and mores and how indigenous people identified. The other word, transsexual, this designating a person born with the physical characteristics of one sex but who identifies as belonging to the other sex, living and wishing to live as a member of the opposite sex. This was first used in 1956 by Henry Benjamin. Okay? Gender, males or females viewed as a group, as sex came increasingly to mean sexual intercourse, gender began to replace it as a usual word for the biological grouping of males and females. This was first used in 1945 in the American Journal of Psychology. Transgender, designating a person whose sense of personal identity and gender does not correspond to that person's sex at birth, or which does not otherwise conform to conventional notions of sex and gender, was first used in 1974. So gender. So these are relatively new terms. Now then, when I was a child, growing up, I grew up in Houston in 1972. And this is what I read as a child. This was my exposure, right? And this is what it was. I read in the paper, city's report on transvestitism almost ready. City Health Director Albert Randall said Wednesday he is nearing completion of a transvestite report for the city councilman after a second appearance by transsexual Richard Anthony Mays before the council. Right? So this is one thing we different today is this is we call dead naming, right? Mays asked councilmen 3 months ago to issue cards to permit true transvestites the freedom of dressing in clothes of the opposite sex. The council told Dr. Randall to compile a report on the project. Okay, so I grew up with the terms transsexual, transvestite. Transgender was not part of the vocabulary then. Mays, who says he's required to dress as a woman for a year before undergoing a sex change operation, had one transvestite charge dismissed in court recently. He was arrested for the 7th time as he left the courtroom in a dress. If you think I can be harassed until I leave the town, you're wrong, he told councilman Wednesday. I love Houston and will stay. Right? Mays, who goes by the alias of Tony Rochelle Mays, said information on the condition of transvestism could be read in a couple of weeks. Okay. Again, the person's true name is described as an alias. All right. And the councilman, a city representative said, Frank Mann accused me of being a publicity seeker. Go ahead and lead a funny life. You can get your operation without the publicity, right? And May said the only publicity involved was trying to get inform the public of the plight of transvestites. And so when I was a child, it was illegal. A person would be arrested. Right? That was a culture that I grew up in. And so there wasn't the word transgender. There was the word effeminate. This is a term my elementary school teacher used to describe me. And since it wasn't part of the vocabulary I learned in my spelling and vocabulary book, I looked it up. And this is what I found. Having feminine characteristics, feminine qualities, showing characteristics typical of a girl or woman. Someone who behaves, looks, or sounds like a girl or woman. So as a child, I read that. I said, yeah, okay, that describes me. Yeah, right? But then I got to number 4. And it said, generally understood as a derogatory term with implied disapproval. Okay, and that really hit me in the gut. It's like, this is a very bad thing my teacher wrote about me. And it was very hurtful. Effeminate is not a protected class. Bullying, discrimination, public shaming was just part of my experience as a quote effeminate child, right? So what's wrong with the phrase transgender woman in common usage and in jurisprudence? It's used as a qualifier, meaning not really. I find it to be in practice like the term I was labeled with as a child, effeminate, generally understood as a derogatory term with implied disapproval. Right? It's exclusionary. 16 states ban, quote, trans girls from sports. Just think of the impact that has on the lives of those banned. And also, it also sanctions bullying and stigmatizing those children. It inspires violence and shame. These are 2 films that I happened to have seen in theaters when I went to movies. And the first one is the film Crocodile Dundee, and this is an image from the film right before he sexually assaults this woman just because he believes she's transgender. And what's very disturbing is there's this whole crowd egging him on and laughing, and it's a big joke. And of course, I saw it in the theater, and of course, everybody in the theater is laughing also. They're in on the joke. And you can imagine how humiliating that is. Especially, I was not warned beforehand that it wasn't in the trailer. I didn't know that this is a type of film I was going to go see, and I went to see it with a friend, right? And then the other one is from Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. I thought this was going to be a comedy featuring pets. That was going to be humorous. I thought I was going to have fun. It was going to be a light film, right? But instead, it's there's physical violence, there's murder, and this particular scene, I don't know if you know the images in the back, but he is surrounded by police. Some of these police are in paramilitary gear, and while he's they're all there egging him on and laughing, and he attacks this woman and literally rips her clothes off to expose her as being transgender, right? Yeah. This reminds. I want to mention Jewish historian Warren Blumenthal, who writes about the parallels between how LGBT people were depicted and Jews were depicted by Nazis. You can find images, if you Google them, images of occupied areas where Jews were brought out to public areas. They were stripped, humiliated, mocked, assaulted, while crowds looked on approvingly and jeered and laughed. And so to see, especially this Ace Ventura film, to see this paramilitary all around them egging him on and laughing and jeering, that to me that it's indistinguishable from the images that I saw of Jews being publicly humiliated by Nazis. Martha Nussbaum calls this shame justice. It's done by mob delight, is taken by diminishing by the dominant group and the discomfort and of the excluded and the stigmatized. This is a type of objectification, a type of shame justice, right? Objectification says your autonomy can be taken away, your feelings ignored, and your body violated. So where does all this malice come from, right? Oh, okay. There's, in addition to films, this TV series also generates fear. Popular. These are just a small sampling of some of the most popular shows, both domestically and internationally, in which people who are identified as transgender and apparently other older shows, transvestite or transsexual, are depicted by these shows. The purpose of these depictions is to churn up anxiety, fear, and anger. And it's an international phenomenon. That's what the very popular crime drama, Midsummer Murders, is from England, right? Okay. And this churning up of anxiety, fear, and anger. So, what's the result? The Texas Attorney General ordering the CPS to investigate parents for simply providing needed medical care and counseling for their children, right? Okay. Then cool comedy. I started watching the Big Bang Theory. That's on the left. There is two of the featured characters. I started watching it toward the end of the series when it had evolved. But after I saw but I wanted to see how did it begin, and so I checked out the DVD of the very first season, and this is from the first season. In the very first season of Big Bang Theory, when Penny is introduced, Penny moves into the apartment, and the joke is, well, that there's this new person in the apartment that had previously been occupied, and this is a line from the series described the previous occupant of Penny's apartment was 300-pound transvestite, right? So this is objectification, and there's no name, just identified by the body. It also objectifies Penny by comparison. That she is an object of Penny is an object of desire, whereas this is a film, a series in the 2000s, and still using the word transvestite, right? An object of repulsion. Okay, and then there's another comedy, a hit comedy called 2.5 Men, and near the end of the series, they had a season in which the John Cryer character dated a transgender woman, but the running joke was that she's a man, and this was repeated again and again by for instance, by the character portrayed by Jared Kushner. Okay, well, things have changed, but when the issues I find is this problematic affirmation. These are from a series Supergirl. Dreamer is a character played by Nicole Maines. This is a scene on the left, a scene between Dreamer and her sister Mauve, and this is the scene in which what's happened is her mother has passed away, and the superpower is passed. These are aliens, and their superpower is passed from mother to daughter, and so the superpower is passed from when her mother passed away. It's given to the Nicole Maines character known as Dreamer, but her sister Mauve is very angry because she thought that she had the right to the power, and this is really disturbing. One of the most troubling depictions, because Mauve is someone who seems to be a loving, respectful, and accept her sister as a sister until Dreamer is given the superpowers at their mother's death. Superpower, again, being passed from mother to daughter. Mauve tells her, quote, "You're not even a real woman." So, is this what even people who are family, our friends, think, but only say when they're angry? Okay. And this is a picture of Nicole Maines at a Comic-Con panel. I was familiar with Nicole Maines long before she was a celebrity or in Supergirl. These are two versions of her book. I read her book when it was a first edition of her book, Becoming Nicole, and on the cover, it doesn't once mention the word transgender doesn't appear on the cover at all. It says the extraordinary transformation of an ordinary family, and it's about how she was discriminated against in school, that her parents had to split up because her mother moved with Nicole to another school district where she could go to school and be respected. But her father had to stay behind because he couldn't afford to lose the insurance and to lose his job. So the family literally had to split up in order for Nicole to be able to go to school without being discriminated against, right? And without being bullied, right? Well, on the right is the most recent edition of the book. Right? And transgender is mentioned prominently. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. So I think the affirmations, like the affirmation and Nicole in the first book by Nicole about Nicole Maine, these affirmations of these children, these affirmations I believe are undermined by the qualifier transgender in life and law. Labeling these girls as, quote, transgender enables lawmakers to exclude them from sports, school activities, and treat them differently and create an environment of bullying. Right? But what does science really say? Right? And this is published in 2022. So this is the very latest in the field in science. Franz de Waal, he writes in his book, there are certain core elements that we're born with. This includes gender identity. People don't adopt gender identities, they embrace them. A fetus's genitals differentiate during the first months of pregnancy, whereas the brain differentiates during the second half of pregnancy. Gender identity is intrinsic and constitutional. It's a trait that taps into the essence of who we are. One of the problematic usage of the word transgender, it seems to be create a third gender that's not science-based. And this corresponds to the legal theories in my case versus the case that actually got to the Supreme Court, the Amy Stevens case. In my case, it was argued that people have the right to affirm one's sex. This right would be in accord with indigenous mores and religion. And going back to that quote from Albert Kober, he recognized that, even though he used some very pejorative and hurtful language, describing this moral ethical view as describing as transvestite sexual perverts, very, very foul language. In my case, it was decided by a jury trial, and the jury instructions, and this is all public record. The jury instructions were that they had to decide on discrimination based on my sex, not on whether I was, quote, transgender. Whereas the Stevens case raised the issue that transgender is a protected class and was a result of a summary judgment. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's see. So how did gender erroneously displace sex? Okay, gender is being erroneously used because of the failure of English to distinguish between having sex and being a sex. Right? You use the same word for two different meanings. Gender, as it's used today, was coined in 1955 by John Mooney, a person about whom serious questions of ethics and scientific acumen have been raised. Gender relates to expectations of women and men, which may vary from society to society and change through the ages. This is from the Frowns de Waal book. So back to his book, though. He says, being a sex is intrinsic and constitutional, the essence of who we are. Okay? So the failure of English to distinguish having sex from being a sex is an undiagnosed problem in our cultural discourse about what it means to be a woman or a man. Instead of using the word gender when we mean being a sex, perhaps we could use the term S with a capital E-S to represent the existential nature of being a sex as intrinsic, constitutional, and a product of the biological development of the brain in the second half of pregnancy. This would solve numerous errors and misapprehensions. This would distinguish between people who exercise their right to explore and challenge the gender norms of society and people who, like myself, for whom sex is intrinsic, constitutional, and biological. And so there's no qualifier needed. A girl or woman simply are. Okay. Until that time, may we all live our lives in peace, with dignity, and without fear. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes. And we have time for a few questions, I think. I wonder. I wasn't. Okay. Yeah. All right.
You're very brave. I had some of the same bullying as an effeminate boy in school and all of that kind of hard stuff to go through, but my story is different. But I listened to you before and your other visits, and I admire your stick-to-itness. It must have been so easy to just kind of disappear, but you did not, and you're kind of a trailblazer for lots of other people who I'm sure look to you or hear of you, and I want to thank you for coming. I don't really have a question, but just an appreciation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
I also would like to say thank you for your courage, Rachel. It must have taken a great deal and must still take a great deal to stand up for who you are and to deal with people who don't understand. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Questions? All right.
Sorry to make you walk all the way. How does it feel to be teaching again? You're teaching again, right?
Yes. I really do love my students, and I think that's. Give me time about my students, and I start crying every time. Because my last memory of being at Southeastern was my students would come to my office to comfort me when they found out that I was going to be dismissed, and I ended up having to be strong and comfort them and saying, it'll be okay, But just to see that outpouring of students coming by and tearing up, and then I was afraid because when I came back, there's so much. When I left, being transgender was not on the public. It wasn't part of public discourse. So not all these hateful things that have been said by politicians. Young children were not being targeted, and vile things being said about them and their parents and their families. And I was afraid that had been inculcated into the young people, into my students, But this past semester, there was, that it was as if, it was just like when I left. The students were still respectful. They were still eager to learn. They were, and I think one of the reasons why this, that has such great statistics as far as retaining and student success is because they know that I care about them. They know that I'm there for them.
And it seems like they care about you too. You're gonna make me cry.
Okay, and that's what was burdening my heart about this. Let's say that's transgender. It's these young people. I see these. I see the change in their discourse. When they say like these young people saying, like Nicole Main, she's saying, should treat me like a girl because I'm a girl. But now, well, transgender, it's just a third gender, and I see that term being wrestled away. So it's a term that is being used to target, to exclude, to stigmatize, and causing so much pain to this community. And it reminds me of a similar experience with young people of when I was a young person. Some of my generation, they try to take possession of the word Indian by using capital N, capital D, capital N to take away that hurt of the word Indian, an odd derogatory term and injury. But that wasn't. But I don't think that was. We don't see that when you read things. You don't see capital N, capital D, capital N. There's still, when they use the word Indian, still Indian, right? And so I'm afraid, that term is given its history and how it's used, that is hurting, it's hurting young people. And that's why I think it's very problematic, and we need to have a conversation. And I don't see that conversation happening. And I was also very concerned about the limit of the Supreme Court decision. It benefited me personally. I was reinstated. Right, but because it's limited to employment, there was this huge backlash, and all these children, like in 16 states, being discriminated, not allowed to play in sports, and the parents threatened in Texas and other states, and so creating that class has created this huge backlash and a great deal of suffering and pain. So the balance. My being reinstated, what it did for me personally, having that class created, and the pain for so many young people and children and students, it's immeasurable. It's really troubling, and I think we need to have that conversation. Anything else? Okay, all right. So thank you.
And again, thank you very much. That was wonderful. Am I on the right page? The offering is a sacrament of the free church. It is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join with us. The offering is given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values. The bowl awaits. You can also donate on the church's app. I invite you to stand in body or spirit for the benediction and extinguishing the chalice. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Please join me in saying the words to extinguish our chalice. The words are in the morning program. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.